Listen, most of what we argue about, most of what we complain about, most of what we've been in prolonged discouragement about has been wounded pride. Most of it is meaningless little things that if you were going to die tomorrow, you wouldn't be worried about it. And so what we have to do is we have to go back to God's idea, God's values, and say, I'm going to live that way. I'm going to live out grace. There was a pastor who pastored across town from Charles Spurgeon. I told you about him earlier. His name was Joseph Parker, and maybe some of you have heard this story, but Joseph Parker was a little upset with some of the care that was given to some of the orphans, the fatherless, and he was preaching through James, talking about being a light and helping the fatherless and the widows. And he mentioned in his sermon that the orphanage that the Metropolitan Tabernacle in London was operating was not taking care of the orphans like he thought they should. He said that publicly from his pulpit at Poultry Church. And so when C.H. Spurgeon, I'll show you a picture of both of them side by side, when he heard it, he was livid. Actually, you can still read the transcript of what he said on that Sunday morning. He got up in his pulpit and he lambasted Joseph Parker. Then he said, I like how we're doing the work for the orphans, and he doesn't even have an orphanage, and man, he just went after him. And I'm telling you, the newspapers wrote about it. London loved it. Man, they loved a good scandal between the two largest churches at the time. And so, man, everyone, this is before Facebook where everyone's, videoing you live and all those things. So everyone flocked to Joseph Parker's church the next week. And when Joseph Parker stood up in his pulpit, everyone expected him to go at Charles Spurgeon like Charles Spurgeon had gone at Joseph Parker. But Joseph Parker stood up and he said, folks, I heard this morning that Charles Spurgeon has taken some much-needed time of rest and he's not in his pulpit today. And so in order to help them with the orphanage, we would like to take an offering. And they took an offering that was so large that they could not collect it on the first pass or the second pass. They had to take a third pass to collect all of the offering. And he took one of the largest offerings that they've ever had in their church's history at Poultry Church, and they took it not to the church, but they took it to Charles Spurgeon's house. And when Joseph Parker showed up at his house with some of his deacons and he presented this offering for the orphanage, when Charles Spurgeon opened the door, he looked right into the eyes of Joseph Parker and he said, Joseph, you have practiced grace on me. You see, Joseph Parker had every right to get up and defend himself. Every right to stand up and say why Charles Spurgeon was wrong for publicly humiliating him.